Hi, everyone. This is Eamon from Relativity. Just giving you the 2-minute warning. We'll be, thank you for coming early. We will be getting started in just a couple of minutes. Thanks. Okay, everybody. Hi, this is Eamon Coyle, and you are at the Relativity Ask the Expert eDiscovery Bootcamp Session 1. All right, so this is our topic today, and I'm one of the facilitators, and I'd like to introduce my co-facilitator, Claire Atkins.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Atkins. I'm a part of our RelativityOne customer experience team, and just briefly been with Relativity a little over 5 years, and you're going to find out a lot more about me as we go through this session, and I'll turn it back over to Eamon to introduce himself.
Thanks, Claire. And I'm Eamon Coyle, and I am also a member of the RelativityOne customer experience team. And I also want to do an introduction of Megan Twible, who is actually on vacation this week. Megan is from our solutions team, and she was very, very helpful in putting this presentation together and would be here for the presentation if she hadn't already scheduled a vacation. And a little bit about me is that I have been with Relativity for about 4 years now. I do want to let you know that if you're here for the RCE credits, they are only offered for the live version of this webinar. They do take about a week to get added. And if you'd like to register for any of our other webinars that are coming up, please visit our Relativity Training Center. And then here's some On24 logistics type stuff. If you have a question for us, please go ahead and enter it into the Q&A and then press submit. What I'd like you to do now, if you want to test that out, is if you could please go ahead and type in yes if you can hear me and see my screen. You can also navigate to the links for additional resources to download the slide deck, track your RC credits, or to learn a lot more. And I'm getting a bunch of yeses. If you're not able to hear me, it looks like most people can hear me. If you are not able to hear me, the problem may be on your end. And so I know with a lot of people working from home, there may be some issues and stuff like that. But that's what's going on. And so it looks like everyone can hear. You can see my screen. Claire and I are ready, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And this is our session 1 agenda. So we this whole session came out of almost like a conversation that Claire and a couple of other colleagues and I all had about an eDiscovery bootcamp, like people who are new to our industry, who don't have the experience that you'll hear Claire and I talk about. What could we put together that would be helpful to those people who are new, to e-discovery, and to be able to just really give them a grounding. So we decided on this first session, which is e-discovery in 60 minutes, and we're going to cover the items that you see up on your screen. So this may be review for a lot of you. It may be brand new. You may learn something new, even if you've been in the industry for a while. But we're really excited about being able to bring this this program, this webinar to you together. We are doing an overview of the EDRM, and following sessions will be deeper dives into the different components of the EDRM. And if you don't know what the EDRM, what those initials stand for just yet, hang around, you'll find out. All right, we'll start with the introduction to discovery. So before we really start talking about e-discovery, we always have to start talking about discovery. And as many people know, as many of you probably know, discovery is an important part of the litigation process in the U.S. Civil litigation system. And it is the part of the process where both parties will exchange requests for production. So they'll exchange a request for documents, and then those documents have to be collected and reviewed and then provided to the requesting party. And then through this process, the truth is supposed to come out, right? You're supposed to find out exactly what happened, what are the documents telling us, what are the emails telling us, you know, and you share, both sides have to share that information with each other. And in that process, you know, you get through the case and you learn more about what the case is about, and you learn more details about the case. But it can be a daunting process, especially with the amount of data that organizations have today. And so that is really what discovery has been. As we start to see the idea of discovery and this concept around discovery is that it really applies into a lot of different situations, and into a lot of situations that the software that Relativity you know, provides to our customers is an integral part of what they do as well. So whether that is an investigation by compliance officers, whether it's an investigation by human resource officers or security, or any of these other places where organizations want to find out what has happened, and they're using the documents and the emails and the communications that were created to be able to find that out. So we find that discovery, while its context as part of civil litigation is of course important, that the concept of it and what makes it possible to learn more about a particular matter or a particular project or a particular event is really important. So now we jump right into e-discovery, and again we see you know, the multiple spellings that you know, that everyone has for e-discovery, but we also have our litigation definition of it, right? So our legal definition of what electronic discovery is, and it's the undertaking of identifying, collecting, and producing of electronically stored information. But we know that e-discovery, the e-discovery industry or the e-discovery community, is really more than that. It's more than just this definition. It's all of us on this call, right? It's all of us at this webinar doing what we do in our normal everyday job, whether that is looking at documents to produce them, whether it's collecting data, whether it's preserving data, whether it's developing software to make the process more automated and make it easier for other people. That's all a part of e-discovery too. And so we really have to take a look at not just what this definition is, but then really also what the community is, what the industry is. And so we've broken it down into these 4 categories, you know, and this is kind of where my experience and Claire's experience and Miga's experience in putting this presentation together for you kind of comes into play, is that we look at the e-discovery community and we see there are kind of 4 big categories of how e-discovery is organized. You could have more, you could have your own opinion about it, but these are kind of the categories that we landed The first one is people, process, technology, and rules. And so the first thing we always want to talk about are the people that are involved in e-discovery. And what we are looking at, this is kind of a map that we put together of where of the different organizations that are involved in the e-discovery community. And then just a sampling, I don't even think this is really all of the titles that are related to e-discovery. These are all of the people that we've put out here. When this industry first started, and when we really started looking at electronic organization of documents, that red circled area under paralegals was really important. Paralegals were really the people who got involved in organizing the documents. They're the ones who organize the documents for trial, organize the documents for deposition, help to organize the documents so attorneys could just focus on review. And what paralegals wanted to do was really use electronic means, the computer age, to help organize that. So might have started with just an electronic index in Word or in a word processing program. Maybe that graduated up to Excel, and then maybe that graduated up to like an Access database. And then we started to see more litigation software. And now we look at the landscape of where we are in e-discovery today, and we see corporations are very much involved in this. We see the security is involved across the breadth of the industry because of the confidentiality of the data. And then all of the different lawyers that may be involved, whether they're external or internal. And then we also see a lot of IT, of course, involved in this as well. And so I'm sure we have representatives of each one of these columns on this call today. And we probably have more that we didn't even weren't able to fit in on this particular presentation either.
So, hey, Eamon, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Where did you get your start in the industry?
So I went to paralegal school until the Loyola University Paralegal Institute. And then I got my first job in e-discovery in sales. So this was 2004. I had worked in retail sales, and I went to work for an imaging vendor. So I was one of those folks who, tried to call paralegals and sell them imaging and OCR, and then at that time, e-discovery was just starting out, and so I started with a small kind of startup vendor in this area, and then I went on to work at a law firm, and then I worked in corporate e-discovery, and then I wound up in at Relativity, and so that's my path. What about you, Claire? How did you start in this industry?
So I think I'll try to do the medium length version of my story. I had actually started out in the industry as a temporary assignment. I was working at a place called OmniDocs. Maybe somebody on the call remembers that place. But my initial job in the industry and as a temporary worker was to print out electronic documents and staple them back together and put them in a box. And that the stapling was based on a printed Excel spreadsheet of Bates numbers. So that's kind of where things started. And thankfully, I did have some computer background, so I could maybe do a thing or two from a temp perspective. And the manager there happened to say, "Hey, do you want to work here full time?" And even at the time, I didn't know exactly what all was involved. And so I said, what exactly will I be doing? And once he explained it to me and I got in there and took a look, I understood it a lot better. But it was definitely a different perspective on, I knew that these things happened in the world. I just didn't know who did it or where they did it or how they did it. And so that was back in 2002, and flash forward to now, and here I am at Relativity.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think anyone went to school saying, I want to be a fireman or I want to be an e-discovery.
Exactly. It was definitely not something that I had planned on, but I certainly am glad that I fell into this industry the way that I did. And I think a lot of people, especially in that time frame, really got their start that way. It sort of just happened to them, right? So a very interesting industry, very interesting challenges for sure.
Yep, and it's been really great to see the growth, and we'll continue to talk more about that as we go through our presentation today. And so this is a good segue because we talk about the process. And so we're going to take you through kind of a history of the process. And Claire just touched on it with her very first job in the industry,
Right.
which was make copies of printed emails. I can remember getting like maybe a disc, maybe CDs, and the team at where I worked would go in and take those, process them, image them, and then print them out and put them in a box so they could be sent to the other side. Started out with that. And then if you were on the other side and then you received that box of printed emails, you would then scan those emails.
That's right.
And OCR them and then put them on TIFF images so that you could view them in a litigation support software at the time. So we kind of moved along here. We eventually got to the point where we could go in and collect and process the emails in different tools. So we could actually go in and get PST files, so a container file of emails. Those emails could be processed in using a processing tool. Where I worked, that's how they started. They went in and got a copy of zPrint, and then went through and processed emails for their very first client, for one of their clients. I don't know if it was their first. These emails are then processed and then they're provided to be in load files, can be loaded into like a litigation review software at that time. You would then maybe click on a hyperlink to see the native file rather than an image. And that was really, really considered like state of the art at that point. And then we move along and we come really more into where relativity starts to kind of enter the picture. And at first, we were one of the tools where we would load the data into Relativity and you would review the documents in Relativity, look at the natives, and then only print the images that you were going to produce. And then as Relativity developed over time, you were able to bring those PSTs, process them in Relativity, review and produce all from the same tool. So all within the same software. And where we are today is we're really and this is really happening across our industry now. It's not just happening at Relativity, although I think we're one of the first people that got there. Where you're really looking at these platforms come together, where you can collect, process, review, and produce all in one platform. And at Relativity, what the platform means to us is that you can also extend that platform. That's where one of those last columns with the software developers and the application developers is so important now to our industry because everybody has different needs and there may be different tools that can be developed. And so the platform of Relativity allows people to do that, and the platform of RelativityOne allows you to do that. But we are seeing that more and more industries are really more and more companies in the industry are also following that path of being able to really give their customers one place to go to be able to collect, process, and review. And when we take a look at technology, I'm going to just take you on a little journey here. So, of course, we started in that box of printed emails on the left. It could be also a box that you got out of your storage center from 50 years ago. That might have been printed by a dot matrix printer or something like that, or that is a carbon copy of an originally typewritten page. So we start out with boxes and image those, and those images would go on a CD and then eventually a DVD when those were developed. And then we have that data then moving into flash drives and moving into portable hard drives. And the way we reviewed this originally really was to be able to look at these in a computer, so on a workstation, if you will, desktop computer that people had to go to the office to be able to use. And now we're in an area where you can view and review documents mobile. You can review them on your laptop. And then the other part of this too is where we would collect data. We would also collect from these areas now too. We can collect from your desktop application, mobile devices, laptops, and then of course servers. And where we are today is, since everything is moving into the cloud, RelativityOne is now in the cloud. All of Office 365 is in the cloud. That where we are able to collect data is from all these different cloud sources, whether it's Slack, whether it's Zoom. All of these different places are where we're able to collect data and then also be able to review in the cloud. So it's this really idea of what is born in the cloud stays in the cloud. And so we go all the way from our boxes to our clouds. Just in the time that I've been in this industry, which is actually less than 10 years. So we've really seen just a lot of technology advances here. And then we do have to talk about case law and civil procedures. And this is where the rules come in to our talk. We've talked about the process, the people, the technology, and now we're going to talk about the rules. So one of the first rules that came out was a data protection privacy directive from the European Union. And this regulates the processing of personal data within the EU and the free movement of such data. So it's an important component of the EU privacy and human rights law. And also this is also, we have a GDPR with the EU. And this is something that RelativityOne addresses by being able to have your instance in a different geo. So, in the last year, we've opened Germany and Switzerland because those countries will have rules that say data has to be processed and reviewed in country. And so we're able to meet that need. And as we grow and as the e-discovery community grows, Relativity will be going into those different geos, as we say. And then the Microsoft antitrust and Attenix. What happened with the data protection privacy is that Microsoft had to develop a tool to collect, process, and produce ESI on a massive scale. And so they developed this particular tool. Also talk about the Microsoft antitrust. And for me, the first time I became aware that you would never, ever, that an email that you wrote 3 years ago could come back and haunt you was hearing on the news about Bill Gates being asked about emails that he had written 3 years ago, and being asked about those. And so that really brought home for me just what was involved in this new electronic world of communication. And then, of course, we have Zubulake v. UBS Warburg. And so Zubulake is famous for the the opinions that Judge Shira Scheinlin wrote around cost recovery, around backups, around the burden of costs, things like that. It was a series of opinions that really, really impacted and in some ways either accelerated or caused the growth of the e-discovery community and this focus on being able to preserve and collect and retain data, in a defensible manner. And so, Claire, I have a fun fact for you. Yeah. Do you know who Judge Shira Scheinlin's sister is?
I sure don't.
Okay. It's Judge Judy Scheinlin. So,
no, I had no idea.
Yeah. So, yep. So Judge Scheinlin wrote these really, she didn't say things, funny little things like Judge Judy said. So, but she had these really great opinions. So very smart sisters.
Nice.
And then so we move from a government regulation to a corporation responding to that regulation into U.S. civil law. And then we come into some nonprofits, groups of attorneys and judges and e-discovery practitioners and technologists and all of that coming together to form the EDRM, but also coming together to talk at the Sedona conference to put together white papers on how to do e-discovery. This is really at the beginning of our industry and at the beginning of what we all do for a living, and this was where the rules were kind of laid out, and a lot of the rules are still very much the same. I mean, I recommended somebody to read the Sedona Conference on Preservation. There's a white paper on preservation. It's from a few years ago, but there's a lot of things in there that are still very, very much relevant to how we do e-discovery today. And then after the EDRM and the Sedona Conference were founded, we have the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which came out in 2006. So these were a really big part. And I remember these rules coming out both from when I was at the service provider and then working for a law firm, and the impact that these rules had on the way that e-discovery was done. You know, there were these questions about what is a document. And so what the rules, the new rules did was they established this idea of electronically stored information, that ESI is the important component of data. And it was left purposefully vague so that whatever happened later on, chats and tweets and all of those kinds of things would fall into this, you know, very large bucket of ESI. So that's really where this got started. And then most recently, again, in civil litigation, you know, the Tadeon v. Greyhound Lines case was where Judge Faccioli talked about parties in an e-discovery case, you know, really in any case now that, because they all involve e-discovery, there was a cooperation principle that you had to tell the other side what you had and how much you had. And so there was really this idea that there should be cooperation around the discovery. You could still be adversaries in court, but there should be cooperation to make the process of collecting and getting the data as easy as possible. So that's my case law civil procedures. As you can tell, I'm not a lawyer. It's been a long time since I was in paralegal school. So just wanted to also give you that overview. And now Claire is going to start out by taking us through the EDRM. And Claire, just let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Thanks, Eamon. So we have mentioned the EDRM a couple of times, and really looking through the different cases that Eamon walked us through, it seemed appropriate for our industry and our community to say, hey, why don't we try to find a way to sort of normalize these phases and steps and put some guidelines around it so that people do have a path to follow. And Eamon, if you could jump to the next slide. The idea here was having something that people could reference. And so what comes of that is the electronic discovery reference model. It's a lot easier to say EDRM, but you'll see that includes things like information governance, identification, preservation, and so on. And really the idea here is that at the beginning of your e-discovery or discovery phase, you're going to have a lot of data, right? You're going to go out and look for, where do I find all of this data? So really you're going to have a lot of volume. And so that's going to be on the left-hand side of this model. And Eamon, if you could click to bring up, thank you. And so as you move through each of these pieces, the idea here is that you're going to move toward, or you're going to reduce the volume of your data as you're finding the most relevant documents throughout the process and the cycle. So we're going to dive into now each piece of the e-discovery reference model and how RelativityOne actually aligns to those pieces. So if we can go ahead and jump to the next slide, you're going to see an animation here that really shows that e-discovery reference model, or the EDRM, and then we're going to replace it with where Relativity lands with those pieces. And so we're going to go through and talk a little bit about each one of those. But to start us out, I'm going to actually jump into the next slide, which is information governance, because that's that really big circle right to the left-hand side of the model. And really, information governance, while traditionally it's been sort of a records management type of approach, notice that EDRM, they actually created an IGRM so that you could have a reference model for your information governance. And notice that it incorporates much more than records management at this point. It's got data governance, electronic discovery, risk management, knowledge management, of course, includes all sorts of different data types and things like that. So the good news is, especially when it comes to RelativityOne, that is what it is, right? It is a data organizational tool. So as as you get data in, whether it's discoverable documents that you need to take a look at, or whether it's maybe communications that you want to track that are associated with that matter, you can always put all those pieces together within a Relativity workspace. And if we jump to the next slide, this really just points out a couple of the different options that we have in Relativity itself for information governance. Just to pull these out a little bit to let you know that they're there. Relativity Collect is really a way for you to gather information from the cloud, and it's not an obtrusive way to do that, so you don't have to worry about interfering with people's day-to-day tasks. And then we also have Trace, which is sort of a, well, it's not sort of, it's exactly a surveillance and monitoring tool that we offer. And it doesn't just focus in on our specific industry, it spans really a variety of industries. And so that's really information governance. I'm going to turn it back over to Eamon to talk to us about the left side of the EDRM.
All right, thanks, Claire. And so we're going to start out with the identification part of the EDRM. And here, the identification part is really across really lots of different, like I said, like across any kind of investigation. There's an event that happened or there's litigation and you want to know who was a part of it. So the first thing you do is you start looking at who was impacted by this or who may have caused a certain situation to happen. And so you're going to identify these potential ESI resources. It could be people, it could be business system, it could be the data where all of this is stored. Most cases and most investigations start with email, or as we are now really learning as with Slack and Teams and all of these different chat applications, it actually starts with communication and being able to collect those communications that people have shared. And so one of the ways that RelativityOne does this and that Relativity does it is that within RelativityOne, there's the table called the entity object. And this object can be connected into an HR source. So through Active Directory, it can be connected. And it's just a way to identify potential custodians using Relativity. And we know there are other vendors out there, that also offer these types of services too. Claire and I really know Relativity, so we always talk about these things from our Relativity perspective. Right. And it's interesting, we understand all of this through Relativity too. So we'll be talking about all of that. The other place is in legal hold. So legal hold you'll see legal hold, Relativity, legal hold repeated a few times. The identification piece for this is that it does connect into your HR source through the entity object. You can also, because a lot of times, just even from my perspective of working in corporate e-discovery, the attorneys don't really know who's involved. They know departments, they may know some of the players, they may know some people, but they don't know everyone. So there'll be a questionnaire, and one of the questions on the questionnaire will be, who else should be involved in this, that hasn't been, that you know of. And so those names will come back, and it's a way to iterate the process within within e-discovery to be able to identify more people who might be involved in this. It's also a way for people to say, I had nothing to do with this, take me off this this legal hold, because it's not me, it's the other guy. And so that you have things like that. And then collect is just a way that we can identify data. And when we process and review that data, we might find that we didn't get everything. And it's easy to go back to collect and expand the scope of a job to get a person's email to. Next, we have preservation. This is such an important part of U.S. civil litigation and any kind of U.S. legal matter with the government, whether it's an investigation or anything else like that, is that data just needs to be preserved. Got to suspend destruction. You got to tell people not to throw things away, not to delete those emails. And so preservation can be really, really an important piece of that.
Yeah, suspend destruction is probably my favorite way of saying don't delete anything.
Yeah, and we know in e-discovery, delete doesn't mean delete.
That's right. We can find it. That's absolutely right.
But for systems, for automated business systems too, it can also be a part of that too. And then within legal hold, you can set up within Relativity legal hold, you can set up a preservation case in Office 365 before you even send a preservation notice. So legal hold notices can take a while to draft. You got to get the language right. You got to explain the case and the matter. You might have to get outside counsel's approval on the language and things like that. Where while you're doing that, if you want to go ahead and say, well, I know these people need to have their data preserved, you can go ahead and do that with Relativity Legal Hold even before you send the notice. And then for collect we have, you can collect data and process it right away, or you can collect data, you can encrypt that data, and you can preserve it until you need it, if you ever need it. But it's a way to go grab the data you need and preserve it, just in an abundance of caution, kind of our favorite term, and one of our favorite terms in e-discovery, in an abundance of caution to be able to go and collect that data. And then finally is collection. You know, we really do have to go and collect the evidence that is out there, many different ways to do this. And so, you know, you can go and download PSTs and do all of those things on the systems you're on. At RelativityOne, what we've done is we've created Relativity Collect. And these are the data sources that are available now. We can collect from Office 365. We just had our 9bark release, so we can collect from Slack. And then we're really excited to be offering an X1 integration. The company X1 has an integration that works with RelativityOne Collect, and it actually goes to non-cloud sources. So it will go to laptops and desktop computers, file shares, on-premise email. So it's a really great integration that uses the setup for Relativity Collect to be able to go and get the data. And then we have other data sources coming soon. What we're developing at Relativity is what's born in the cloud stays in the cloud. So we want to be able to collect from other cloud sources. And so what will be coming in the next 3 to 9 months will be Google Workspace, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom chats. And that's the left side. So I'm going to turn it over to Claire to talk about the rest of it.
Thanks, Eamon. Okay, so we've identified our data, we've preserved it, we've collected it. Now what do we do? Let's process it. So really what processing is in the e-discovery world is really ingesting that data into a tool. And in this case, of course, we'll be talking about relativity processing, but it expands out all those documents. So you have your email messages and their attachments, maybe zip files and those things within. And so the point of processing is really getting all of that data out so that you can take a closer look at it. And so that's what this section really covers. And you definitely want to plan, right? So you want to know what data you have, how you're going to process it, what you're going to look at. Are you going to remove duplicates or not? Are you going to look, what different pieces are you going to look at? And really getting prepared for the next steps, which we'll jump into in a second. But if you'll jump to the next slide, it shows us exactly where, and I sort of did, because we don't have specific we don't have multiple processing tools. We have relativity processing. I just pointed out a couple of pieces here that to let you know what relativity processing will do and some of the features that it contains. So I mentioned here processing a variety of file types, of course, removing duplicate documents, intuitive error review, and then the whole point of born in the cloud and staying in the cloud and keeping all of your data together here is that you can move from ingestion and processing directly into review in RelativityOne. And so that's where relativity and the EDRM align with processing. If we could move to the next slide, please. All right, so next up, you've got your data processed, you're ready to take a look at it. That's where we enter the review phase. And really, a big piece here is having a strategy. What is it that we're reviewing for? Are there certain timelines or people or keywords or any of those pieces? And so develop your plan. So make sure you train your reviewers, and then really taking a look at that data, conducting that review, and planning for your next steps. And so if we can jump to the next slide, really, well, what does relativity have to do with review? That's really where we got our start, right? So we were originally created as a review tool, and we have things like customizable layouts and views. And just for your awareness, a layout in Relativity is, you could associate that with a coding form or something along those lines. And then a view is really a list of things. And so those are our terminology that we use there. You can perform complex searches within Relativity. You can, of course, track all your decisions in there, whether it's a decision of responsiveness or decision to make a production or any of those pieces. And we also have active learning for technology assisted review, which is a tool that serves up those most responsive documents as you move through the set. As you review, it's learning from the decisions that you made and moving those most relevant documents into your reviewer's view so that they can make those calls and you can get through the review hopefully in a much shorter amount of time. All right, next up, please.
Oops. Sorry, I went too far. Right.
Oh, you're fine. So really, review and analysis, the spots that I put them can be flipped because you may want to do some analysis up front. Maybe you're not ready to just jump in and do a review of all of the documents that you've identified as needing to be reviewed. And so analysis, I'm looking at this more from the angle of searching, analytics, all of those pieces, and we'll jump into that in just a second. But looking at this particular chart here, you definitely want to, we're looking for facts, we're doing investigation, we're trying to narrow the scope of our documents using these analysis tools so that we can really get to those most relevant documents or those most relevant pieces that apply to either our litigation or our investigation so that we can continue on to the next step. And as far as how Relativity aligns with the analysis piece, if we could jump to the next slide. We have a whole lot of fun stuff listed here. So, of course, searching. You can set up complex searches with using DT search. We have conceptual and classification analytics indexes. Of course, we offer some, I personally am a big fan of the widgets and dashboards because they're interactive and I can click and drill down into the pieces that I really need to see based on keywords or people or dates, any of those things. We also have clustering capabilities, which essentially what this is doing is it's pulling all the documents that are conceptually similar to each other into these clusters or packs so that you can take a look and see maybe something didn't hit on my specific term that I was searching for, but maybe it's somehow related from a conceptual perspective. So that's sort of the clustering piece. And then, of course, we have our structured analytics, which includes things like email threading, near dupe detection, name normalization, all of those pieces to help you sort of see that full picture while you're doing your analysis. Next slide, please. All right, so we've analyzed our data, we've reviewed our data, and we might have to produce it. And really a production is just that moment when you've located those pieces of information that the person who requested it from you, that's when you're going to send that information over. So you want to prepare it. You want to know specifically what format the production should be in. You also want to make sure that you have all the correct documents ready for production and that you're not, sorry, hold on. Apologies, I didn't want to cough in your ears. And that you're not producing anything that you shouldn't be, privileged documents, for example. And so the way that Relativity aligns with this particular item, and if you could flip to the next slide, please, is that with Relativity's production feature functionality, you create the production directly within Relativity. So you're placing those, confidentiality stamps on there or branding, you're branding on your Bates numbers, any of those pieces, you're able to select from different types of numbering options. So you could produce and number based on pages or documents overall, or even choose from a field. And we know we want to keep that privileged information out of the line of sight of anybody who's receiving this data. So you have the ability to redact specific text within these documents. And you can also track all of your productions within Relativity itself, not only in volume and the Bates ranges, but also the images that you produce out of Relativity are going to be associated right back to that reviewed document so that you can just jump over and see where all those where that document was produced, when, and what sort of designations were on it, and also if there were any redactions. And after production, I actually have a bonus, which is project management, because we have all of these things going on. We probably need to manage these projects at some point. So I wanted to make sure to include this in here as well as a part of the phases of the EDRM, and just to make sure that you knew that just like with any project management, you want to make sure that you're scoping it out, you're planning on what's coming next, you're executing those plans, and then looking at any changes that need to come in, and then you're iterating on that process as you go through. So that is the EDRM.
All right, and that is our presentation. So this was, as we mentioned, this is session 1. And we do plan on having more sessions where we actually take even deeper dives into each one of the, or groups of the EDRM to provide you with even more information and then even more insight into how RelativityOne addresses each one of these. So we're looking forward to doing to putting those together for you. And we have time to answer questions. So I'm going to go through and just see what questions we have available right now and respond to those. You can also put questions into the chat. And Claire, is there anything else you want to add?
I'm looking through and I see somebody mentioned that they're familiar with OmniDocs, which I'm surprised, but that's great to hear.
We should have warned people. It's going to be old school.
That's right. We're going way back in time.
We'll just say, yeah. If we ever do this one again, we'll just say it'll be old school week at Relativity webinars.
That's right. That's right.
And I don't see a lot of questions so far. So there was a question. The deck is available. It's actually available to you from your On24 screen. There's like a panel that will have the deck and other information that's related to it. And yeah, just going through. I'm trying to go back from the very beginning because we didn't answer any questions as we went through.
Somebody joined at 4 a.m. Thank you so much. If you're here after your work hours or before your work hours, thank you so much. And of course, if you're here during your work hours, thank you too for taking time away from your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw a couple of questions about, okay, so we saw the deck. When processing files, it uses NIST lists of hashes. Is this still a standard practice? Yes, absolutely. So we do have the NIST, the ability within processing to not include those documents that end up on the NIST list in your published document set. And if you're really new to eDiscovery and you're not familiar with what NIST is, please aim and correct me if I mess up the acronym here, but it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, I believe is the way that okay, good. And so really the idea here is that
unless I'm wrong too. So
okay, somebody correct us if we're wrong. But the idea here is that companies or software companies submit hash values to the NIST organization, and they put this on a list of hash values so that when you're processing the data, it compares the hash values to the data that's in your set, and it will leave out those pieces that just they're usually system files or logos, things like that are very, very common. And so yes, the answer is yes, we do absolutely allow you to not include those in your processing when you publish out and go to review.
And then there's a question here about, do you see compliance fitting into the eDiscovery equation? I absolutely do, because I worked for 2 Chicago corporations, one in financial services and then another one which is a futures exchange. And both of them, where I sat as an eDiscovery specialist, was in compliance. Simply because compliance was where a lot of regulatory investigations came in. Also, compliance officers, like the financial services, if they were reviewing any communication, concerning trades and selling and things like that, they would use Relativity to be able to do that. And then also the same with compliance organizations. One of the things that happens especially in highly regulated organizations, is that they have to answer a lot of inquiries from their regulators. And so one of the things they want to do is they want to be able to be consistent in how they respond to that. So, you can create a workspace of all of your responses to the regulatory agencies and be able to use relativity tools like keyword searching and STRs and even analytics to find conceptually similar responses is really helpful in those. So I think compliance is really does fit into that that e-discovery model of being able to, find information and then be able to provide it to another party and analyze it. So, yep, you get a copy of the deck.
And I'll say for all the specific questions around the products, we will be having subsequent sessions after this one to deep dive into some more of the products specifically. But right now, if you want to learn stuff right this second, we have a ton of resources available online for you to look at each of our different products and a ton of Ask the Experts to take you through exactly what those do and how they do them. But if you have a specific question that you're not seeing answered through any of those means, reach out to your contact at Relativity or reach out to Relativity directly, and we'll definitely answer those questions for you.
Yeah, and if we don't have time to answer all of the questions, we do get a printout of the questions, and so we'll respond to you individually too. And let's see, the question about, there are some questions about specific things. So for Microsoft Teams, if an organization's chat histories are deleted after a couple periods, like a week, can those still be recorded and collected? The way I know the way that Office 365 works is that it has to be preserved. If something is deleted completely out of the system and no longer exists, there's not a way to get it. At least not through Relativity. You'd have to go to like a forensics person. And let's see, and Slack is a cloud-based source. To say Slack a cloud-based source. Can Relativity produce in native formats? You definitely can produce in native formats. And is there a session 2? There will be a session, we think 2 or 3 maybe.
Right.
So, and they won't be weekly. We do our webinars once a quarter, and so the next one will probably be in the next quarter, and so we'll probably have these quarterly as well. But I really appreciate the enthusiasm for wanting to see it more. And then how do I, you can get on an email list of all of our training sessions. So you can be notified from marketing about, if you want to be notified about when this session is or when any of our webinars are, they can be. And the session will be recorded. So give it a couple of weeks. They'll, the trainers will come in, and our instructional design folks will come in, and they will edit out all the profanity, and they'll make it so that anyone will be able to see the presentation. So, and is Relativity considered FedRep? Yes, we are. We actually have a GovCloud, so reach out to your CSM if you're interested in that.
And we have one question about how do I make sure I'm alerted when the next session is available? I'm not familiar with the alerts. Do we have an email that can go out, or do you have to subscribe to a newsletter or something?
I think you have to be on the marketing.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Contact your CSM if you're not getting the marketing in there. And then, do you provide access to Sandbox test environment? We do provide access to Sandbox, and you should talk to your account manager if you do not have access to a Sandbox. Not everyone gets one automatically, so that's why I suggest you call your account manager. Oh, do we have a good way to deal with embedded files? That's kind of a loaded question. Maybe we can take that more into when we talk about processing. Relativity processing does extract embedded files. You should probably also reach out to your CSM or to your account manager to have a more in-depth conversation about that. But we do extract embedded files. Yep. So are all the parts mentioned in the RelOne system available on your on-prem server product? They are not. There are features within RelativityOne that rely upon the underlying cloud architecture of Microsoft Azure. For example, Collect is not, it relies on processes and the structure of Microsoft Azure in order to be able to operate and go and collect the data. And that is not, that cannot be replicated in a server environment. And so there are some other features too within RelativityOne that are only available simply because of the nature of cloud architecture. And then can you touch a little bit on the cloud service of RelativityOne? Is there services like Amazon that? RelativityOne is based on Microsoft Azure, and so we only are working with Microsoft Azure. And if you're interested in more in-depth information that I can provide on a webinar, then please reach out to your account manager or to our sales department. And there will be a copy of the sales. Relativity is SOX compliant. So the question here is Relativity SOX compliant. As I believe, Claire, we have all of that, right?
SOC 2, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And ISO 27001, FedRAMP. Yep.
Okay. Cool. And then if you're not able to download the slides, please contact training@relativity.com, and they'll be able to send you a copy of the slides. And then we don't provide a printout of the questions. We refer to the questions if we're not able to answer them in the 60 minutes that we have allotted.
I'm looking through these too.
Yeah, I am too. There's a lot of really product-specific ones.
Right.
You may have to come back. I feel like this is also giving us a preview of things we'll address in our next
for
session.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you all for the great questions. Is there a way to
scrub metadata from a document if needed? There is. I have done this, but it is a workflow, and so I would reach out to the solutions@relativity.com team if you need to do something like this. Yeah, we can. So we don't collect from a Mac. The X1 integration, you can reach out to X1. There's a question here about collecting from a Mac. The X1 integration would be it. We do process Apple files, though.
Yes.
And will there be any sessions for RCA support and training? If you're interested in RCA support and training, please reach out to the training@relativity.com team. They can provide you with that kind of support. And so the question, would you say that the compliance Department of Financial Institutions mainly use Relativity? We wish they would, but I don't think they do. I think there's a variety of really great tools. I mean, I think as an industry, we're blessed with having just really great technology and really great technology companies. You know, we of course love Relativity, but we know there's some really great tools out there as well too. So. And then you can produce colors. Yeah, so yeah, our colors do color. There's a question here about producing very large color files. When you produce, they are large, and that would be something that we can bring back to our product team about. And if you want to learn more about your RT credits, reach out to training@relativity.com. I believe it's training or it's certification.
Yeah, I was thinking certification.
Yeah. Okay, so RTE, reach out to certification@relativity.com. All right. Those are the questions we have. We have a few minutes left, so if you have more questions,
Nick Carter.
please let us know. And then if you...
Thanks, Nick Carter.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Everyone, he's saying nice things about us.
Yes, exactly. So,
thanks, everyone.
And thank you, everyone. We'll stay on in case there are any more questions, and but you're certainly free to drop as we finish. And we look forward to seeing you for our next session.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, everyone. Not only do I love this company, but I love this industry
Aw,
and all the people in it.
yeah, yeah.